We spent about 2 hours, 2+ hours, kind of rumbling, bumbling, stumbling our way through the transportation sector and all points in between. We leave the final half hour that Dave joins us on Nemo Nation for a little bit of a longer form conversation. And I'm going to let Dave introduce Artie Crawford to you.
Artie Crawford is the Director of Cybersecurity at NMFTA, the National Motor Freight Traffic Association.
Say it right, Association.
Association, yeah. Artie, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Dave, and thank you for having me with you this morning. I can only hope that I can carry on the torch the way that Ben Wilkins typically does with you.
Do you have a beard? Do you have a really big, impressive beard? That's the first question.
He does have a beard.
He does?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, you see, you're already on the right start, Artie. So everything's going fine. Things are working out.
Yeah,
great.
but it's no comparison to Ben.
Nobody's beard is comparison. He looks like one of the when I was a little kid.
King Beardo.
There were always two choices when I was a kid. I'm a little boy in the 50s, Artie. So you had
now he's a little boy in the 50s.
Really, you had Keds or PF Flyers for your shoes. You had Schwinn or JC Higgins for your bike. You had Ford or Chevy, Coke or Pepsi. You know what I'm saying? And Dave, back in those days, you had two cough drops that kids would take: Smith Brothers and Ludens. And the Smith brothers were two guys, and one of them looks like Ben. He's got a Smith brothers beard. Good-looking guys.
I was really trying to figure out where you were going with that.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the Smith brothers cough drop box?
Oh, my God.
Yes, I have, and
Okay.
that's why I'm laughing so loud about
Yes.
that, because that is fitting.
By the way, Tara, if you're listening, please post a picture on our Facebook page of the Smith Brothers cough drop box and basically tag Ben.
Ben Wilkins.
Yeah, I mean, tag him there and say, this is Ben. Good morning to you, Artie.
I knew I should not have Artie. Come on.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. So, Artie, we have talked with Ben about the other publications that you guys have done for owner-operators and small fleet and large fleets in terms of cybersecurity, battening down the hatches. You guys have just released this month, on Thursday the 12th, as a matter of fact, the NMFTA Cybersecurity Cargo Crime Reduction Framework. The subtitle is Reducing the Attack Surface by Understanding the Complexities and Interdependencies of the Cargo Crime Ecosystem. How you guys did this in 34 pages, I'll never know.
Well, we merely skimmed the wave tops on this one, Dave, because if you dig into this, there is so much complexities, there is so much interdependencies, and as the title says, which is really a mouthful, but it kind of describes everything to a T.
Indeed. And one of the things that you can, and you've done this too. You read through something you think is for you, and then you feel like, you know what, this isn't for me. I'm going to leave it. The thing you start off with was, who is the intended audience for this? Because this isn't really for everybody, but everybody should be involved. That's kind of a weird conundrum, I think, isn't it?
It is, in fact, because the things that apply here are, like you said, for everybody. But in order to implement, you got to be a little bit bigger than most, right? Than the single owner operator.
Oh, okay, I got you. So this is really a ground level platform in a sense for operating securely and safely, but the complications and as you say, the interdependencies, the interconnections of everything. So you whack one mole and two more moles come over here, and you just don't know what you don't know a lot of times. And even when you learn stuff, that changes by the time you get finished learning it in a lot of cases. So this is a never-ending process for all of us now.
Well, you're absolutely right on the fact that it's a never-ending process. And pretty much by the time the ink dries, you're ready to rewrite, to be quite honest, right? Because either the tools, tactics, and procedures have changed, or the group of bad actors that you mentioned in one is actually expanded into a different set of bad actors at that point. And the threat landscape, as you kind of alluded to at the start of this, is continually evolving. So when you kind of put all that together, you've really got a mismatch of problems of which one do you sort out first and which one do you try to tackle first. Do you grab the lowest hanging fruit, or do you try to implement a complete strategy? And honestly, right, you got to think big, start small, and scale fast in most cases. And by doing so, you can start to, reduce that over time and reduce that threat posture over time, and then make sure that landscape is a little bit more contained, and you can funnel the bad actors to where you want to, so that you can see what they're doing and how they're doing it and when they're banging on your doors.
This is probably not a good question for you, Artie, because you're not in law enforcement per se. You work with law enforcement a lot, obviously. Are we catching any of these people?
We absolutely are, and I love that you bring that up. We do have a lot of problems in the LE community, and I say the problems is who to report to, where to report it, how to report it, jurisdictional problems, and then prosecution problems as well. But as far as catching the bad guys, we're seeing numerous events where we're recovering cargo, we're figuring out new ways to prosecute, and I think it's starting to catch top of mind that, okay, we've got to start to deal with these dependencies, whether it's local, state, federal law enforcement. I see some of the task forces now deputizing state law enforcement so that they can cross back and forth on a state line when they're really close. Like, let's just say, for instance, the port of Memphis, right? Well, that crosses into Tennessee, Arkansas, and Mississippi, and they've done a really good job out there deputizing some of those guys so that they can cross these state boundaries and actually follow to fruition, right, and track the bad guys and actually take some of them to justice.
I'm gonna. Hey, good morning. By the way, I've been just kind of listening and enjoying myself with the conversation. I go back to the I-10 corridor scam, the one that wasn't cybersecurity, but it in fact involved, the fraud of, the spotters and the people who and the slammers and the whole thing of kind of shaking down people for insurance payments. It was only brought to justice when, in fact, the NOPD got together with the state police, got together with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI. Is that something that really is going to be the tipping point in regards to really bringing this stuff and getting under control, is when more and more interstate and local jurisdictions begin to work with partners beyond their own borders and boundaries? Is that the wave of the future? Will we be seeing more of that, of more kind of, task force of different groups of law enforcement organizations all kind of focused in on the same thing?
You have actually hit the nail on the head with that one, because that is truly how this is going to be reduced, right? Is by having those interagencies have these conversations, setting up open lines of communication, but then on top of that, allowing the carriers, the brokers, the 3PLs, the shippers, having them know where that first call needs to be, right? When they suspect a missing load. If it's going to be your local county sheriff, then they need to make sure that they're talking to the state investigative agencies, which are talking to, like you said, the task force, the national task force. So not only can they bring this to justice quickly, they can actually recover the cargo in some cases. And I'm going to add to this, right? There are a couple federal agencies out there, especially the U.S. Secret Service, that have made great strides in recollecting Bitcoin, right, or cryptocurrencies, by going back and doing the backwards math and breaking those wallets and actually recovering real dollars back for the organizations that actually reported the crime in a timely manner, and they were able to be successful in recouping those dollars.
Wait, Artie, are you suggesting that Bitcoin might be a haven for people who are engaged in nefarious activities? I'm shocked. I am shocked.
I see your surprised face on the radio, Dave.
Oh, yeah. Dave is looking like he is stunned. He's just stunned over there. So, I mean, basically, we're talking about the idea that once, and this is an infrastructure unto itself, because these kind of task force need to stop being task force and need to be almost interagency, ongoing propositions to kind of deal with this. You talked about it, the idea of empowering deputized people to cross a bridge into Tennessee or to cross a bridge into Arkansas is the beginning of something we may see more and more of going down the line, correct?
Absolutely. And I've talked with a lot of my LE counterparts and friends that I, keep from previous relationships, and they're saying the same thing. I mean, they're even going to prosecutors now, which I think is a very interesting concept, and bringing up the idea of prosecuting under the RICO statutes when a gang has 20 members, but they all steal $200 worth of stuff from a truck, right? Where no prosecutor really wants to go and get one gang member for $200 worth of tennis shoes off of a truck or off of a train. But when you combine that with a RICO charge, now they're able to prosecute the entire gang. So we're seeing some creative things take place on the judicial and the prosecution side. We're seeing that the federal law enforcement agencies are willing to work with the state investigative agencies, and then combine that with the state trucking associations that are being advocates for the carriers. They're helping move the ball forward.
I love that, by the way, the idea that somebody gets, arrested and then they take out an ID, and when they take out that ID, what ends up happening is the ID is like from a different state, is like, gotcha on RICO, right?
Yes, sir. And that's part of the things that we bring up, not for a shameless plug here, but that's a part of the things that we bring up inside this reduction framework is these complexities, right? These complexities are real. I mean, every story that we've had or every, event that we've kind of reviewed with a participant, right, has come back to some of these complexities. And then you add in the convergence of cyber, operational, and physical security, right? NMFTA has taken a really forward stance on the cybersecurity and the operational security circles of this problem. And then the physical security, right, which is not our bailiwick, but just a reminder that gates, guards, and guns, right, do play a point, in this, because at the end of the day, you got to cut a lock, you got to get it off a dock warehouse, you've got to actually get those goods physically somehow, and I think those things are the things that carriers, shippers, they're very good at, as well as. Then when you add in the cybersecurity and the operational security aspect that we're bringing to the table, I think we've got a recipe, or a framework in this case. I think we've got a recipe to start to reduce this in real time.
I love that, by the way, Dave. Dave, Nemo, and I are chatting with Artie this morning. I haven't heard that phrase in a while. Gates, guards, and guns.
Yeah,
I hadn't heard that in a while.
I've made note of that myself.
I love that one. I've heard that before, but it's been a long time, and it's a great reminder how much of this is about collaboration. How much of this is about making sure that the people who have the expertise in one area couple up with the people who have the expertise in another area, because as you know, monitoring cybersecurity is the first step, because at the end of the day, you hit the nail on the head, Artie. Even if it's redirecting freight, all of which is legal until where it arrives, somebody's got to be there to stop the final step along the way. That almost none of this happens except for the transfer of money, except in IRL. It all ends up, unfolding in real life at some point, and at some point you've got to be able to figure out who your partners are to hand it off to the guys who actually guard the gates with guns. At the end of the day, that's what needs to kind of make this all work and kind of work as a seamless flow. Let me ask you, from your standpoint, how do you guys foster those relationships? Because you have a lot of contacts from your previous experience with law enforcement, contacts in those worlds. How do you guys maintain and foster those relationships from the NMFTA standpoint?
So I think that's a great question, and this is where Ben and I have absolutely turn into, a power duo, right? Because Ben has just so many contacts in the trucking industry. And then I have a set of contacts from previous lives in the LE community and in the cyber community. And we've kind of, to use the term again, we've converged those two, we've mind melded, and we've kind of started bringing all these people together and saying, okay, how do we help? How can we facilitate a conversation that both of you understand, whether that's a federal agency or whether it's a carrier? Sometimes the vernacular is not the same. So we do a really good job of sitting in on those things, providing a conduit for, working group type of environments where everybody can understand what everybody is saying. And I think that's one of the things that Ben and I have really capitalized on by bringing those sets of contacts together. But I have to go out and say that it's been really incredible that same group of contacts are willing to work with each other to understand what's going on. Whether that's the LE community, thinking that they're better than everybody else, which we've seen that in the past. We know what we're doing, right? But they might not understand the context of what was happening, right? They know how to put guys in silver bracelets, but they don't understand the context of how to get that guy in a silver bracelet. Whereas the trucking company has no idea how to put the guy in silver bracelets, but they know how their freight got stolen. So having all of these people work together, I think, has just really been the center focus of NMFTA and the strategy of our group to make these things work.
Okay, going back to the idea of one agency working with another agency, wow, when 9/11 happened, that kind of blew up in our face to where we understand that, you have all of these agencies within the federal and within state and local governments that don't talk to one another and everything's proprietary. You're saying the same thing now, but without that edge to it, because we are now all starting to realize how we need to work together and band together and all of that. Is it working to the degree that you want it to work at this point? Because it used to be very private about, okay, if I have a load of TVs stolen, I don't want anybody to know about it because the next guy that has TVs to haul is not going to call me. So we have all of that. Is that still part and parcel of what we're talking about here, or are we kind of breaking some of that down?
Well, I think there's two pieces to that, right? And the old school methodology goes to exactly what you're saying, Dave, right? Is that I don't want to tell anybody that I got freight stolen because then my reputation is going to be damaged. Mm-hmm. But by having these open communications, right, we're starting to realize, or people are starting to realize, hey, wait a minute, there's a whole lot more questions I need to ask, right? And I need to be able to tell my story because there was some good, there was some bad, and there was some really ugly about how it happened. And by sharing these stories and getting it out there in the open, people are able to learn. I say other companies, other brokers, other shippers, they're getting able to learn what successes that they had, what were your lessons learned that you won't repeat. And then by playing those out in the LE community as well, we're able to see the same things take place there. Where we're really trying to make the progress, which I think we've got a little ways to go, is in the prosecution side of cargo theft, right? The prosecution side is a little bit, it's just not sexy enough, and I'm using my Joey air quotes when I say that, mm-hmm. right? Because it doesn't get somebody elected and it doesn't get somebody promoted, right, to prosecute 200K of stolen bacon. It kind of gets you laughed at in your peer group, even though it was a $200,000 theft that you prosecuted. So we're trying to take that stigma away by making these conversations out in the open, and then we're starting to make things happen.
That's a long conversation that people have to have, and it's like one of those things too that when I mean you're absolutely right. The idea that removing that stigma is so important because at the end of the day, I would tell people if I was advising them, people are going to find out. By the way, if people are already laughing, people already know. So it's better to get ahead of it. It's a strange example. Remember Johnson & Johnson with the whole thing with the tainted Tylenol wasn't even really tainted. He just pulled it. And people thought that would be the end of Johnson & Johnson, and instead it boosted their stock, boosted morale, got everybody, able to go back and buy their products knowing that it was taken care of. There is something to be said for getting ahead of this and coming right out front and say, we got ripped off. It's not going to happen again. We're taking the following steps, and we're working with partners in all sectors, including law enforcement and in the trucking industry and in the transportation sector. It seems the best strategy is to actually just fess up and say you got taken. It's a great way of telling your investors and your clients, we won't get fooled again, right?
Absolutely agree with you. And I think in this digitally interconnected world that we're in, there is absolutely no hiding it. Whether you're the product of the victim or whether you're the victim itself or whether you're the supplier or a third-party vendor of someone that's been associated with, we are too interconnected in today's day and age to hide from it. So your best bet is to put that communications plan in your business continuity planning, right? And make sure that you have a good story to tell, that you're honest and transparent about what happened, and that your business is still as solid as it ever was. But make sure that, you're able to, like you said, get out in front of it and tell the truth about it, because this is just a stark and vivid reminder that we need to make sure that we're talking to our third-party vendors, that we're talking to our shippers, our customers, our carriers, that everybody is talking throughout the process to make sure that, hey, we're doing everything that we can to make sure that all of this is, is being done the best of our abilities. And matter of fact, it's even okay to say, is there anybody that you would reach out to that we haven't reached out to yet? And I think by making it a joint, quote unquote, joint problem, right, when somebody's load gets missing, then all of a sudden, we've got several accountability issues taking place, that everybody's being held accountable and everybody's, looking for the solution, not just throw up their hands in the air and say, well, let's just make an insurance claim and we'll move forward from there.
One of the things that we hear a lot about now is transparency. Everybody wants transparency. So everybody knows everything all at the same time. There are no secrets. It's all there. It seems to me that at some point or another, in dealing with what you're dealing with here, and in dealing with the latest publication that you guys have out, that has the long title that has so much meaning, NMFTA Cybersecurity Cargo Crime Reduction Framework. Part and parcel of this is to kind of geofence some of these responsibilities, I think, security-related responsibilities, so there isn't really transparency, because an open field is an open field. And I'll ask Jim's question here. Am I making sense here? Do you get what I'm trying to get at, playing a little bit of a devil's advocate here, I guess, Artie?
Well, and I hear you, Dave, and it makes perfect sense, right? But understanding which swim lane that you're in, whether and using the framework as an example, right? Are you in the cybersecurity block? Are you in the operational security block? Are you in the physical security block? Well, in the middle is the convergence of all of those, and that's where those conversations have to take place. Mm-hmm. Whether it's cameras in the yard that are maybe unsecure, so the cybersecurity guys got to help them secure those. But where I think that the rubber meets the road is in the operational security aspect, right? If you get an email that says, and maybe it's a spoofed email, so cybersecurity, missed one coming through the email filters, right, that says change my banking numbers, right? Well, we might have to go back to an old school phone call that picks up the phone and calls the organization and say, hey, did you really ask to change your routing and banking numbers? And that's just good operational practices or operational security where they got to talk. And then, when that accounts payable or receivable person reaches back out to cybersecurity and says, hey, this email got through and our filters aren't doing the things it's supposed to do. Now we can tighten this up, we can loosen this up, but ultimately we realize that we made a mistake somewhere along the way. and we were able to, get things moving in the right direction.
Artie, I have to wrap this up right here. Jimmy Mac here. I will tell you, and Dave and our good friend Foamaster Ray, the producer, will back me up here. I can't tell you the number of times to them and to everybody else in this company I've said, pick up the god-darned phone and call somebody. Stop emailing. Stop doing all that. Talk to a human being. It's often the best way to kind of figure out what's going on. Appreciate your time, my friend. You're welcome back anytime. And by the way, you're giving Ben a beard and an intellectual run for his money. Well done, sir.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And guys, thanks so much for having me on today. Go out there and download the framework. I think it's relevant to anybody who's running a fleet, a shipper, or a 3PL. Download it. You've got some great information in there, and may you try to be faster than the bear.
Fantastic, by the way.
NMFTA,
or at least the other person.
NMFTA.org, the National Motor Freight Traffic Association. And Artie, Marley is going to be here in town.
Good talking to you, Artie. We will have to take a break here really quickly.